Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 1. We will explain about philosophy of Islamic education as a science. My name is Malika Ramaiza Putri.
My name is Dayu Pramudia.
My name is Tri Utami.
And the first presentation is from Tri Utami.
The definition of philosophy of Islamic education. The first definition is the philosophy of education based on Islam is a philosophical analysis of education based on the main source of Islamic teaching, namely the Quran and Hadith. So, by using the Quran and Hadith as a basic or foundation and theory and concept in philosophy, of course, there is no need to doubt that the contents therein are 100% correct. The second definition is Islamic philosophy of education is in the form of human activity and developing in its potential in relation to God, nature, and human himself. So in philosophy studies, there is always a relationship between God, nature, and human themselves. The third definition is philosophy of Islamic education is a philosophical analysis of the problem of Islamic education, both theoretical and practical problems. Islamic educational philosophy is a philosophical analysis of various Islamic education issues or philosophical theories about education in Islamic society. So, the existence of Islamic educational philosophy can be a solution to educational problem in society. So, from the three definitions above, it can be concluded that Islamic educational philosophy is a philosophy regarding educational problem that is based on Islamic teachings to solve educational problems in Islamic society. Okay, next is the object of study of the philosophy of Islamic education. The first object is material object. Material objects are the main raw material of science, which is more general and macro-dimensional. The second subject is formal object. There are two objects of study of Islamic educational philosophy. Material objects are the main raw material for science, which is more general in nature and has a macro dimension. The material object of the philosophy of science is knowledge itself, namely knowledge that has been compiled systematically using certain scientific methods, so that its truth can be accounted for in general. In this phenomenon, there are clearly three things that stand out, namely human, the world, and the afterlife. The human, the God, and the afterlife. A material object is a material that becomes a review of research or the formation of knowledge itself. Material objects are also things that are investigated, looked at, or highlighted by a scientific discipline. Material objects include anything, both concrete things and abstract things. Apart from that, material objects are the material targets of scientific inquiry. Through our research, it can be anything, whether material object or non-material object is not limited to whether only in concrete really such as human or the universe, or only in abstract reality such as God or something other divine. The material object of philosophy is everything that that exists and that may exist. The material object of philosophy is everything that exists, whether it exists in the mind, exists in reality, or exists in possibility. As explained above, material objects have the following characteristics: very general in nature, not related to facts because philosophical issues are more speculative, concerned with values, critical in nature, synoptic in nature, and implicative in nature. And the second is a formal object. A formal object is something that is the focus of study or particular point of view on something, which is more specific and has a micro dimension. A formal object is a certain perspective or a certain point of view aimed at and held on the material from which research or knowledge is formed, or the angel from which the material object is highlighted, which determines a type of knowledge. The formal object of the philosophy of science is the nature of science, meaning that the philosophy of science pays more attention to the fundamental problem of science, such as what the nature of science is, how to obtain scientific truth, and what function scientific has for human. Formal objects are material objects that are seen and approached from a clear point of view, a certain perspective, or in other terms, the ability of human thinking to obtain correct knowledge. The formal object of the philosophy of science is not limited to what can be sensed, but rather the entire nature of things, both real and abstract. An example of a material object in philosophy is the green tea plant, while an example of formal object is the substance contained in green tea, which can provide health benefits for humans.
So, I will explain about methods of studying the philosophy of Islamic education. In interpreting the problem, the philosophy of Islamic education used the analytical method. According to Haidar al-Wasilah, he divides the analytical method producer into several stages, including first, convinced that nothing is believed to the truth. When we study using analytical methods, we must not rush to the truth. The second, elaborate on the material reviewed to help solve problems. We can divide the problem into several parts to make it easier to solve the problem. The third, think in parts that are easy and simple, progressing to more complex and relative until something is universal as a certainty. We can think from the easy things first, then slowly we can more things about complex things. The fourth, build general concept to connect different human experience. The methods used in analyzing the philosophy of Islamic education include the first, the Fashatan method. This method can be understood as knowing what other people feel through personal experience. The second is interpretation method, chaining the message that are explicitly and implicitly contained in reality. The researcher is the person who translates or explaining the result of previous method. The third is the hermeneutic method. It aims to seek and find the meaning contained in the object of research in the form of human life phenomena through understanding and interpretation. So, this method is to discover the deepest meaning or nature of values contained in the research object. The fourth, inductive-deductive method. Between induction and deduction, there is a hermeneutic cycle from general to specific, and so on. So, deductive is the drawing of logical conclusion based on exciting premise. And the inductive is draw conclusion from general premise like observation or data and find the specific conclusion. Number 5 is comparative method. Comparison forces us to firmly determine similarities and differences so that the nature of the object can be understood with greater purity. So this is observation by comparison. Number 6 is heuristic method. Heuristic method is a logic of creativity. Heuristic has a rule. E. Formulation of a justification system. B. Investigation of basic assumption. C. Search for alternative. D. Attention to inconsistencies. And E. Sensitivity to problems. The steps are E. Describing the working system of the scientific methods. B. Criticism of the paradigm of science and thought. C. Discovery of new path. And D. Development towards creativity. Number 7 is language analytic method. The method of language analysis to find clarity on the meaning of words, term, or concept contained in text. Number 8 is historical method. This is to know the development or periodization of the thoughts or philosopher Islamic education.
Okay, here I will explain about source of Islamic education philosophy. The main source that influence of philosophy of Islamic education include the first is Al-Quran. Al-Quran Al-Karim is the holy book that come from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and was given to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the stages as the guide to the truth and in the use as the first source in the philosophy of Islamic education. Absolutely. The Al-Quran can encourage humans to think using reason, develop science and new theories so that human can define the real truth. And the second is Al-Hadith. Al-Hadith is the second source in the philosophy of Islamic education after the Al-Quran. Thus, Al-Hadith is the explanation of the Al-Quran. This Al-Hadith is in the form of word, action, and approval from the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. With this hadith, it can help us understand the context, detail, and development of the teaching contained in the Al-Quran and help find the truth in the context of philosophy of Islamic education itself. The third is ijtihad of companions and Muslim thinkers. Ijtihad is an Islamic context that refers to effort to understand Islamic law by Muslim scholars or thinkers, like the Khulafaur Rashidin group or the companions of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. These companions and Muslim thinkers have performed ijtihad in various contexts, including in the philosophy of Islamic education. The ijtihad of the companions and Muslim thinkers in the philosophy of Islamic education has illustrated important basic in understand and developing education in Islamic context that in the influential to this day. For example, the past, Ibn Sina put forward the concept of integral education, which includes physical, intellectual, and moral education. In addition, there are now Muslim thinkers or scholars who make ijtihad regarding the development in the financial product that are in the accordance with Sharia principles. The fourth or the last, Western thinker. As we know, the source of Islamic philosophy of education not only come from the Islamic thinkers themselves, but are also influenced by Western thinkers. Some Western thinkers have made important contribution to the development of Islamic education touch, and it can't be denied that the West has excels in the science and technology. Thus, Islamic education touch. However, we never to remember that are useful in modern Western thinker must be adapted to Islamic values and principles, so that combination of Western touch and Islamic touch can produce an educational approach that is in accordance with the determinant of Islamic teaching. For example, John Dewey was an American philosopher of education. He developed a progressive education theory that emphasized the importance of learning through real experience. Okay, here I will explain about a reflection. The philosophy of Islamic education is a branch of philosophy about education based on the Islamic teaching. As we know, Islamic teaching is based on the Al-Quran and Al-Hadith, so that the philosophy of Islamic education can help us understand how Islam views the educational process in achieving a deeper understanding of life and religions. In fact, the object studied by general philosophy of the philosophy of Islamic education is anything that exercise in the world in according with the nature of existence, process, and value. All things in the world have a form of existence, both physical and metaphysical. The process of the good to contain value in the good can be study of philosophy. Okay, in the philosophy of Islamic education, before determining the final goals, it can necessary to examine it first and adjust it is source of Islamic education philosophy, such as the Al-Quran, Hadith, ijtihad of scholar and Western thinkers, so that it will find an absolute truth. Okay, I think enough.